We're very happy to welcome Tricia Robertson here. Tricia has a background in mathematics and physics, and it certainly shows in her attention to detail. She was a long-term council member for the Scottish Society of Psychical Research, and in that organisation she was both a secretary, vice president and president of the society, and she provided a series of 22-hour lectures on psychical research. So Tricia, welcome today. It's lovely to have you with us, and I'd like you to perhaps take over and tell us a little bit more about your work with the starting with the Scottish Society for Psychical Research.
I will give a little overview, and then hopefully we can go from there. I don't know the background of everyone that's listening to this program, and that in itself can be quite difficult. I presume everyone here is interested in various aspects of the paranormal. Is that correct?
Yes, pretty much.
But everybody will have a different interest, and herein itself lies a problem. I call myself a psychical researcher. And you have to remember, maybe some people don't know, the term psychical research was brought to be around 1882 with the London Society for Psychical Research. And it was set up to investigate the claims, basically, that spiritualists gave at the time. But herein lies a problem, because everybody now, associates psychical research with spiritualism. That is just not true. What we should be saying is we're investigating, psychical researchers investigate all claims of paranormality, no matter where they come from, but they were originally set up to investigate the spiritualists of the time, in the Victorian time. The problem now is, it's not that there's no phenomena going on, the problem is there's far too much of it. There are so many avenues. There's near-death experiences, there's healing, there's poltergeist, there's all sorts of things. And there's, as you know, I have written 2 books about my experiences and research with psychical research in a hopefully humorous manner and not boring as hell. And my 3rd book identifies some areas of psychical research which has got nothing whatever to do with the survival of consciousness. Now, I totally agree. The most important thing that we can ask ourselves in this life is there any evidence that when we pass off this mortal coil, our consciousness survives? And that is the buzzword, consciousness, because it is the correct word. It's not soul, it's not spirit, it's not any connotation of anything metaphysical as far as I'm concerned. Once you start bringing in religious beliefs to it, then even more people dismiss what we have to say. And that is why I concentrate solely on evidence. What is the evidence for this? What is the evidence for that? As the early psychical researchers did quite correctly. So that is my standpoint. That's where I come from. Is there such a thing as spiritual healing? Does it actually work? Does a hands-on healing work? Does psychic surgery work? That sort of thing. But it is a huge gamut of topics that we can look at. And tonight we can only possibly touch on 1 or 2 of them. So that is actually where I come from. When I was, Wendy asked me to give a little bit of background. Up until about 1982, 83, I had no interest in this whatsoever. I was perfectly happy. I was married, 2 children, 2 cars, 2 jobs. Everything was fine until I started to look at psychical research. And then probably like a lot of you, everything went downhill after that. When you know something and maybe your partner doesn't, but that's a different story altogether. So I started from a very skeptical standpoint with really no particular religious belief whatsoever. I was fortunate enough not to have an indoctrinated religious belief when I was young, so I could make up my own mind. And being of scientific and mathematical nature, I'm not of an airy-fairy attitude to imagine these things are going on. So that is where I started from. And I started by going along to various meetings and listening to people, skeptically at first. And as time went on, things progressed. And then I developed some of my own experiments, and that was a preliminary stage. And then Archie Roy, Professor Archie Roy from Glasgow University, and I were, Archie always said, put together by whatever cosmic consciousness it is. We never intended to meet and work together. But you know as well as I do, if something's meant to be, it will be. So the powers that be made Archie and I meet, and from then on, from giving him a lift home to his house, we worked together beautifully for 25 years. Now, Archie Roy is a professor of mathematics, well, astronomy really related mathematics as well. And he and I have completely different standpoints. I was coming from it from a pragmatic style, starting to look from the spiritualist phenomena standpoint. He was coming at it from a different angle. And he himself said that when he was about 17, 18 at Glasgow University, he went into the library of Glasgow University and he saw all these wonderful books by eminent scientists that were talking about psychical research. And Archie said to himself, what's all this rubbish doing in Glasgow University? But then, to his credit, as he got older, he read them and he said, thank goodness he did, because psychical research, I think Einstein said, is one of the most important things that we can do in this life, is to look at what's going to happen after it. So that was how Archie and I met. We were thrust together. We always worked well together. We used to go out in cases, and that was fine. And then we formed this group called PRISM, P-R-I-S-M, Psychical Research Involving Selected Mediums. We just made that name because it fitted the word PRISM. We met in London, and to begin with, Archie was the president, I was the secretary. And for years, we worked with PRISM, with psychical researchers in London, and some spiritualists. I won't say mediums, but people of spiritualist genre worked with us. And it was during that time that I actually came up with the idea of measuring the generality of medium statements. And I said in a meeting, and there was Professor Arthur Ellison, Professor Roy, Professor David Fontana, can't remember, Monty Keane, I can't remember who else was there. And I said, well, why don't we measure the generality of medium statements? If mediums make a statement to 40 people, how many people in that room can actually take that full set of statements, or the majority of them? Arthur Ellison said to Archie, that must have been done before. And Archie said, no, it hasn't. So from that, Archie and I worked together. We designed experiments up to double-blind protocols. And for 5 years, we worked throughout the country, people gathering audiences together, and we tested mediums, testing the hypothesis that all medium statements are so general they can apply to anyone, because that's what the public think due to the media. After 5 years of work and double-blind protocols, we disproved that hypothesis with a chance value of 1,000,000 to 1. That means there's only one chance in 1,000,000. In actual fact, it's a little bit more than 1,000,000. We're being very conservative, that all of those statements were due to chance, which is a marvelous result in scientific terms. So the sort of thing you have to watch is, though, you have to use good mediums and good researchers. If you've got skeptics to do the same thing and use people who are not up to the job, the mediums they use probably wouldn't be any good at all. I only deal in the best cases. I only deal with the best mediums. I only deal with the best researchers, because you probably know as well as I do, at least 50% of the garbage we hear about the paranormal is in fact that garbage. And therein lies another problem. The media latch onto that. They put up a poor case and they say, you see, there's nothing in it. And that is what we are up against. And this is my latest rant, is for over 100 years, good people, intelligent people have been examining the paranormal. The evidence is actually there, but it gets shelved. We don't hear about it in the news. We don't hear about it in books, unless people like you and I bring it to the attention of the public. That is the problem. That is why I have written 3 books on this, so that the man in the street can read for himself what's going on, and I also give them further reading they can go and find out about themselves. This is a huge problem to me, the fact that we cannot tell enough people there is no death, consciousness survives. And that's my rant finished for that one. So the paranormal mediumship, yeah, we did that. And if I have an area of expertise, although there are no experts, I would have to say that it probably is mediumship. My first few books relied quite a lot on mediumship, wonderful mediumship, modern day mediumship, historical mediumship. But my third book that's not out yet, as Wendy knows, brings that a little bit further. Because having done mediumship, reincarnation, near-death experience, all of these things, we have to look at things that are quite bizarre within the paranormal. And not just people that are absolutely mad and off their heads. And there are many things that happen within the paranormal. The paranormal simply means something that happens out with our normal understanding and out with our normal scientific parameters. And many, many things happen that we can do as human beings. Well, not all of us. Some people have the ability to do things paranormally that are just unbelievable and bizarre. And that is what book 3 is going to be about, as well as further evidence, of course, for survival of consciousness. Many of your listeners probably will have heard of Jared Kwasi. He was around, I haven't got my notes with me on Kwasi, I think it was around the 1950s, 60s, something like that, but and a bit before that. Jared Kwasi, and it's very well documented, had the ability to go back to consciousness, right? When we are dead, a medium is supposed to tap into our consciousness, or we're to tap into a medium's consciousness when we've died and give information. Jared Kwasi had the ability to tap into people's consciousness while they were still alive. For 40 years, he worked with the Dutch police, and they used to come and say, a person has gone missing here, bloody, bloody, blah, give them the name, and he would tune in and say, or give them information like, I'm afraid that person is dead, and he could tell you details of how they had died. But he could also give details of people who were still alive. He would say, that girl, she is going to a certain place in the country. He could name the place. He could give a description of where she was. She's going to be taking a lorry, a red lorry. She'll end up in this place, that place, and don't worry, she'll be back in 6 days. And sure enough, everything he said happened. And he, as I say, he worked with the police for 40 years, which is quite unbelievable. So this man could not only tap into the consciousness of those alive and those who were actually dead, but the interesting thing to me, Wendy, is he did not say he was speaking to the person that was dead. Unlike a medium who says, she is telling me, he would just say, I'm very sorry, that boy has died, and his body is found in a river near a culvert, and beside him is his fishing rod. But he never once said that he was communicating with the boy. He was merely getting the information. That, I don't know what it means, but that has got to be something we've really got to think about. He also claimed that he could tune into things that happened in the past and give accurate information about things that happened to people in the past. And that seems to be correct. And he also claims that he could tap into what was going to happen to a person in the future. And to that extent, he did succeed, especially with one of the famous experiments I think you're alluding to. I can't remember the dates and times. It's all in the book. It's all in facts and figures. But Jared Kwasi was found by the wonderful researcher Andrea Puerich. And he was a wonderful researcher in psychical research. And he wanted to test Jared Kwasi's work. So he went along to wherever he lived in Holland to see Puerich. Puerich didn't actually speak Dutch, but he got someone to do a translation for him. And they set up much like Archie and I, only much the same, only different. They set up experiments where Jared Kwasi would say, if you give me a date and time, I will tell you who's going to be sitting on a particular chair. So this one particular one that I've illustrated in great detail in the third book represents where Puerich set up a set of experiments whereby there was going to be a meeting in a month's time in a particular woman's house, like 40 miles away from, I think it was Utrecht. The idea was, and Kwasi was told, In that venue, there's going to be set out 40 seat numbers. The seats will be numbered 1 to 40. You can pick a number, or we can give you a number, and you can tell us who's going to sit in that seat. So Kwasi actually, in this case, actually did pick seat number 9. And Kwasi waxed lyrically about who was going to sit in seat number 9 at this meeting a month in advance. And he gave great detail about the woman with the short middle-aged woman with the reddish hair. And he gave, oh, I can't remember how many statements about this woman, very, very unusual statements about her, where she lived. And he said, on the day of that meeting, she will be taking her daughter to the dentist, and there will be a great fuss over the daughter going to the dentist. So, of course, Puharich has arranged this with other researchers. He's arranged to do this. Now, the people at the other place, wherever it was, didn't know anything about seat number 9. They were told nothing. They were simply told to lay this room out with 40 seats, to number the seats, and as people came in, let them choose whatever seat they wanted to sit in. Nobody interfered with the choice of where the people sat. And sure enough, when it came to that meeting, the woman that sat in seat number 9 was exactly the woman Kwasi had described 1 month before, down to the very fact that her daughter had been to the dentist that very day with a toothache and had a tooth out, and it caused a great fuss. Now, how that happens, I don't know. You'll have to read the further detail to realise just how good that is. It's very minute detail in it. And then after that, Puharich and other psychical researchers repeated this experiment 400 times. And in each case, they did this experimentation with Kwasi that turned out to be correct. The seat number that either he was given or he chose was the person that he had described to the letter, down to the T. Now, how that happens, I don't know.
Tricia, for me, the interesting thing about this is the implications for mediums, that mediums can be doing this psychically. Like, there was no question with Crosset about mediumship. He was getting this information psychically, and yet many people take this as evidence of spirit contact. When somebody gets that kind of detailed information, I think it's a very important thing for researchers and for mediums to be aware of. Would you agree?
Well, we have a problem, you see, as we do with everything. We have a problem with language. What does the word psychic actually mean? Psychic to me is normally you're reading the person. But Kwasi didn't know who the person was going to be. So how could he read the person when he didn't know? I don't know the answer to this, by the way. I'm only putting the ideas out there. So it can't be psychic. And Kwasi never claimed once to contact the dead and get information from them. He never claimed that. As you say, if you want to call that psychic, we can call it that because we don't have another word for it. But maybe we need another category. We maybe need like a category like spirit contact. When you get spirit contact from the person, there's no doubt about it. The personality of the person comes through. There's a question and answer. There's an ongoing discussion between the person who's died and the person that's here, which is only relative to these two. Then you can have the psychic things like you went to Benidorm for your holidays last year, which is of no use to anybody in actual fact, but other than to say you're getting information about them. But then you've got to remember the term remote viewing as well, where, for example, in America, where they did the remote viewing, the Stargate project, many people could remote view from map coordinates what happened at those, or what was going on at these map coordinates. Now, this has got absolutely nothing to do with our consciousness, with the consciousness of the people. It's to do with in that area. And you know, the whole problem is we do not know the nature of time. We do not know the nature of how we communicate. But all of these wonderful things like Kwasi, remote viewing, we don't know enough about us as human beings. We really have the most amazing talents that we don't know we have. And we have to be very, very careful of putting down definitions that we know nothing of. I don't have an answer. I'm just merely pointing these things out. Spirit communication is something quite different to the things we've been talking about with Kwasi. But Kwasi was certainly quite a man. He actually was quite a bad-tempered and grumpy man. He wasn't a man of great spiritual care. He quite often was quite grumpy with people when they phoned him up. But he did the job. And the good thing about Kwasi is he never charged one penny for his services in 40 years. He would say to the police, but he did say, God has given me a talent, and if I use that for gain, I may lose this talent. He did once bet on the horses, and he did win, and he took the money, but he gave it to charity because he didn't like it. So what it all means, don't ask me, I'm merely pointing out, it's actually proven, it's shown that these things happen. And it makes it, as you say, it makes it much more difficult for mediums to actually realize if they're contacting someone in spirit. Of course, a genuine medium, we all know, will know in contacting the consciousness of that person that's passed over. This is why it becomes more and more difficult. It doesn't get any easier with all of these extra things that go on. So that was Jerry Kwasi for you.
Well, tell us about Ted Sirius.
Well, that's even worse.
Again, I think this is the whole point about this third book of yours is to just alert people to all of these anomalies.
The whole point of all of my books is to make people think for themselves. Now, Ted Sirius is even weirder, and he was a very, very weird man. All the details, of course, are in the third book. Ted Sirius, it was bandied about for years that Ted Sirius could think images onto Polaroid film. Now, it had to be Polaroid film. And you're going back again to about the 1960s with Sirius as well. And one of the wonderful American psychical researchers, I think he was a psychiatrist, a psychologist, Dr. Joe Eisenbud. He heard about Ted Sirius, that this man could project film thoughts onto film, and it showed you a photograph. And he thought this was most peculiar. In fact, I think it was the Illinois Society for Psychical Research that took to do with Ted Sirius. Now, I'll have to cut the story very, very short because it's far too intricate. Anyway, Eisenbud took it upon himself through a very long way to get in contact with Ted Sirius. Now, Ted Sirius could project thoughts and pictures onto film, but in many cases, he only could do it when he was blind drunk, which must tell us something. Pistis apart, as we would say in Scotland, he was out of his box with alcohol when he got his best results. Now, Joe Eisenbud, as a very interesting and knowledgeable researcher, realized this was something extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. So he spent 3 years and a lot of his own money investigating Ted Sirius. And as I say, it's quite comical in one sense when you read about it, but it's really not, because Eisenbud had a terrible time getting this man to undergo experimentation at all. But one of the things that actually takes my fancy is Eisenbud went to a whole lot of people that Eisenbud had seen before. And people said, yeah, he could project, usually buildings, Washington State Building or the Pentagon or something, the office of JFK. They could project these onto, just with thought alone. You would bring along, Eisenbud would bring along his own film. Sirius never touched it at all, and he would concentrate, sometimes with the use of a little tube, looked like a toilet roll holder, but there was nothing in it, just a piece of cardboard. And sure enough, after a time, not always, but some of the time, there would be an image projected onto the Polaroid film. There was no doubt of that whatsoever. And Eisenbud couldn't realize why nobody thought this was wonderful. So he went to a particular professor in another university and he said to him, well, you've investigated Eisenbud, dead serious. What did you think? He went, well, he's okay. He said, we gave him a picture to project onto film, but when we opened up the film, he projected the wrong building onto the film. So we didn't bother. And Eisenbud said, he projected the wrong picture, but he still projected a picture onto the film. And he kind of went, so what? And Eisenbud spent 3 years trying to get people to take this man seriously. And it was just, he could do it. And he could do it, but he couldn't do it to order. But then again, if I asked you to write a poem, a wonderful poem, you probably couldn't do that to order either. But there is no doubt that this very strange little man who had to be drunk could definitely project images onto Polaroid film. No doubt about it. With strict protocols, many scientists of good faith saw that. And once again, it's a very long, intricate story, and in some cases, it's very humorous, although Eisenbud might have thought so. But these things happen. That's the whole point. I want to open your mind. This happened. You'll see the evidence for yourself. All of the people that said, yep, this happened under test conditions, no doubt about it. This man can think things onto film. Now, that's not normal. But once again, I didn't say it happened. I'm only saying it's true, and it did happen.
Just one quick area of your expertise, and then we'll open it to questions, and that's your investigations of psychic healing, psychic or spiritual healing. Can you just give us a little introduction, and then people can take it from there?
Well, I have an 11-page lecture called Do Miracles Happen? And it's all about spiritual healing. We'll just call it spiritual healing for want of a better word. Some people use different words. Some people say you can have magnetic healing where you put your aura on the person, but it's much more than that. Well, personally, I did a 5-year study on the medium who was an excellent healer. I studied Gary Mannion for 5 years, and I ran experiments myself, and I got patients for Gary to work on. And while he was doing his healing, there is absolutely no doubt about it that Gary Mannion had a wonderful effect on the majority of people that he gave healing to. And he was very good with them. He was excellent. But as I say, there are so many good healers. For example, Guylaine Playfair, you mentioned to me earlier, the writer Guylaine Playfair, who's written many books. Guylaine Playfair spent 2 years, at least 2 years in Brazil, examining some of the Brazilian healers. I don't think he saw Arrigo, although we all know about Arrigo. Everybody listening probably knows how good Arrigo was and how genuine he was. The guy went to see a man called, Edivaldo was the main one that he investigated for 2 years. And once again, I go in great detail in the book with that. Edivaldo was wonderful. Now, the good thing about all of the healers, Arrigo, Edivaldo, Salas, some of the others I obviously don't know, they never took a penny for their healing. They gave all of their spare time. See, Arrigo had an ordinary job, and he healed at the weekend. Edivaldo had a normal job during the week, and every weekend he would drive 500 miles to where he did his healing in Brazil. Free of charge, he would heal possibly 200 people over that weekend. And Edivaldo, and all of the details are there. There's far too much to discuss as a generality. Unless you want me to give you one of the gory ones about Arrigo, which is absolutely true. And Guylaine Playfair was, these particular people are absolutely genuine healers. And I'm sure there's many more, and I'm sure, as in everything else, there are one or two that maybe weren't not. But I'm only dealing with the ones who are proven to be absolutely genuine healers. I'm not talking about the ones that open up with blood and guts, because I haven't studied that. I'm talking about the people that I have looked at. Now, healing in general, very quickly, I can give you, there's been healing studies done of all kinds, distant healing, hands-on, all that sort of thing has been studied for years and years. One of the first ones, I'll read this, I've got a piece of paper here. A Dr. Randolph Bird, who was a medical doctor, he ran a controlled study for people who were prayed for or distant healing. So he had 192 cardiac patients in one place, and he had 201 similar patients in another place, which were acted as a control group. And some of them they weren't sent healing at all. Now, they all had similar cardiac conditions. The patients knew they were taking part in the experiment, but they didn't know if they were being sent healing, a distant healing, a prayer. They didn't know what group they were in, but they didn't know if they weren't getting any healing at all. And the outcome was that the patients who were thought about, whether it's prayer or distant healing, they recovered much quicker than the control group. Now, in the year 2000, Benner again reviewed 61 reports of healing studies. And he found that, and I find this interesting, excuse me for reading, I hate reading, but I've got to read it. He found that healing in a religious context, any religion, was no more efficacious than you and I sending out thoughts to someone. I want to send out thoughts to Wendy Zamet that she's feeling better than she was before. Now, anybody can send distant healing thoughts, anyone. You can all do it. You don't need to be anything special. If you have the correct intention and you want someone to get better, all you have to do is think about it intensely and mean it. Anyway, Benner found that healing in a religious study wasn't any better than outside. Excuse me. He was a psychiatrist who thought that healing was charlatanism until he witnessed healing for himself. These people, Aston, Ernst and Harkins, reviewed 23 studies, 5 with prayer, 11 with non-contact healing, and 7 different distant healing approaches. And they found that with 16 double trials and blind trials in both, the prayer value did have an effect. A distant healing intention, once again, had a slightly better effect than prayer, but there wasn't much in it. So healing works even if you send distant healing to someone. And the interesting thing is, if you send healing to someone, it could be the person next door, or it could be Wendy Zamet in Australia, and it doesn't make any difference. The healing effect is just as potent, and no matter how many thousands of miles you're away.
Tricia, as always, it's delightful to see you. You're yeah, I'll shave it one of these days and be incognito. As always, you have wonderful things to say. You're such a fount of knowledge, and I enjoyed hearing you speak. And there's so much more going on now, and you're deeply involved in it. We have today is a transition period in our lives, in our understanding of the afterlife, of the greater reality, and we're just babies in the woods right now. But it's people like you. You're just doing such marvelous work to help us to understand what's going on. So thank you. It's wonderful.
Thank you. The other thing is, if you can hear me, that 100 years ago, people had wonderful, wonderful evidence, and people seem to think that evidence is not worth anything. Of course it is. It all builds up to where we are now. But as I said before, Craig, the problem is there's so much nonsense spoken out there that people don't know what to believe as truth. And that's the problem, unfortunately. And I don't know what we can do about it. It's like reinventing the wheel and batting your head against a brick wall, you know?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer.
Yeah, but we're looking for funding right now to do the research so that we can do that. We already have one person who has indicated an interest in funding physical mediumship research. So that's our first for it, right? So, and we've just done the mailings, and we're just expecting to get the responses. And we've got to do the research. We've got to show people that it's valid for once and for all. There's no reason why for once and for all we can't.
I don't know what you have in mind, but whatever physical research you do, you have to do in light. There's no point sitting in darkness. It means nothing.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. You're right. Yeah. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be pulling together the mediums, physical mediums, and those who are involved in physical mediumship circles and make these decisions. What is it that we have to do to prove to the scientific community and to others the reality?
You have to do it in light for us. Well, not doesn't
Could,
it bright light, in light of some kind, and record it in real time. Obviously,
could be it,
yeah.
right. So that's where the research is going to go.
Well, good. I wish you luck with that, and hope that that comes off.
Thank you, Trisha's beautiful presentation. I wonder if you could please repeat the result, now that we can hear so well, of the study with the 100 plus cardiac patients.
Right, I shall read it for you. I have it here.
Thank you.
This was a Dr. Randolph Bird, a medical doctor, and he ran a well-controlled study for prayer and distant healing, which is just sending thoughts. There was 192 cardiac patients that were prayed for or thought for, and another 201 patients acted as a control group, which meant they weren't prayed for or thought about at all. And they all had very similar conditions, sort of similar ages, same heart conditions. This man was a heart doctor. Now, all of the patients, all of them knew they were taking part in a study, but not one of them knew if they were being prayed for, thought about, or they were not being prayed for or thought about. And when all the results were in, there was undoubtedly that the patients who were thought about or prayed for recovered much quicker than the patients who were not prayed for. And that's fascinating. Hello?
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got a question?
Hello, Trisha. Thank you so much.
Hello. We meet at last.
Yes, that was amazing. I love your stories. I love it. I would like to maybe get a little bit of advice on, I want to do my PhD on spiritual healing. So at the moment, we are sitting in healing seances where spirit uses everyone, all 20 cities as one energy. And so they do distant healing, then they do healing with the sitters and say, a dad is in the seance, his son killed himself. So they bring all these energies together for healing. So, and then direct healing, all in the one seance. So for study purposes, I know I get then too carried away with everything at once and nothing, nothing then gets the focus. What would you say would be not the easiest, but the most powerful area to work with?
Well, you've actually answered your own question. One thing at a time, not all of that at the one time. One thing at a time, excuse me. I think, because I don't think it has been done, we call that battery healing when you've got all the people together.
Yeah.
It's the battery you're sending the charge out. And you would have to write a protocol for it, like what you intended to do, how many people were involved, where you were sending it to, and keep that all not secret, but keep the knowledge to yourself of what's happening. You have to document everything. If it's not documented, it never happened.
Yes.
And you answered your own question. You can't do too much at the one time. And I would start, because I don't think it's been done, and that would be great if you did the battery healing and you identify the patients. If you can back it up with medical records, hospital records, that sort of thing, you really have to get evidence. It's not just a case of Margaret Smith's got a headache and now she feels better. That's not going to work. You have to, actually you're going to have to choose your patients where it's something that can be verified. For example, somebody maybe with a very bad disc problem, we'll send the healing. And of course, you all know that everything is energy. Everything in this world is energy. Some people will call it from the spirit world, although I don't like that expression, are able to take that energy and translate it into physical energy, much as Gary did with the healing, or Abraham, whoever, or like Chapman and Lang, Dr. Lang could work through Chapman and effect a physical cure on the person. He was able to do that using whatever this energy is that they use. So you have to have something that can be worked on, you know, like a slip disc, or not even just a slip disc, something wrong with the person. And you see if you can make that better with the battery healing. It would be better if you did not tell the person you were doing it. You can select, say you selected 20 patients, right? And you say to these patients, I'm doing a random set of experiments with sending distant healing. You may or may not, much like this, you may or may not be receiving healing. Now, you'll get one or two placebo effects. You will get one or two saying that they're better. But it should be a very definite thing that the people you've targeted should be much better than the people you haven't. If it's going to work for you, it might not work, but give it a go. I would like to hear the results of that. That would be really good.
Yes, my aim was to say I would love people with a real medical recorded history.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then see the changes.
That's, yes.
Maybe I start with that.
It's not going to be easy, but do it as battery healing. Do it as battery healing. Everybody concentrating, if you've got a photograph of that one person or whoever it is, and you should find a change actually. If you're all doing it, it all comes down to intention. What is in, and it's got to, it's not just sitting there, oh, I'm sending out healing. You've really got to feel it. You've got to emotionally be attached to the healing that you're sending to get the best results. And I would be fascinated to hear how you get on with that, Inga. Physical healing. So you've got to identify what you're doing first of all. Yeah. You've got to write out the protocol of what you're going to do. Yeah. And by all means, you've got my Facebook account. You can run it past me and say, we're going to do this, that, whatever. And I'd be quite happy to have a look at it and see if I could make any suggestions.
Thank you. That's terrific. Has somebody else got a question?
Hi, Tricia. We spoke before on SNUI when you did the science lecture.
Yes.
Guy Lyon Playfair, one of my favourites, a friend of yours. Yeah. I wrote in the chat box, I'd like to know if you're aware of any research having been undertaken on the subject of angels, as described in the books by Joan Wester Anderson. I don't know if you've read any of her books.
I haven't. The trouble with, as I said at the beginning, there's so many avenues in the things that we do. Angels and UFOs are things I haven't even looked at because I'm too busy with mediumship and consciousness and all of these other things. And I am not aware of any research, actual research that's been done with angels. I'm not aware of that, sorry.
She'd be a good subject because she had this incredible story about her son who was in university one side of America, drove an 18-hour drive with his friends from university back home throughout the worst storms in mid-December or late December. And she thought the son was touched by an angel. And so she, being a journalist, put an article in, or an advert, in all kinds of publications across the US, asking for people to send her their angelic stories. And her books are filled with such stories. Now, they fall into a bunch of different categories. Some of the categories are clearly spirit people. Well, we would just call them the spirit. Yeah. Yeah. They quite clearly, but she's from a Christian background. So she says everything is touched by an angel. And her books are very positive, and they end with something like, we can all be angels, you know, for the people around us. But I happened upon one of her books. It was a book I saw in an Oxfam shop at midday. I left it there, and I had to run back to the shop to get the book before it closed. I read it, and I didn't think anything of it. my wife had seen angels, the archetypal angel with wings.
Mhm.
And after 20 years as a spiritualist, I just didn't believe in angels.
Mhm.
No belief whatsoever.
Mhm.
And then 6 months after reading one of Joan Wester's books,
Mhm.
I actually saw the kind of powerhouse of energy that
Mhm.
she is calling an angel. And it was archetypal, 8 or 9 feet tall, with wings and bursting with energy.
Wow.
I still didn't think I'd seen an angel. I've got to be honest with you. I thought I'd seen a projection as to what the person in front of me thought she had seen.
Yeah.
And then she confirmed that she had seen such an angelic being, in fact, 3 of them, when she
Mhm.
walked into the Arthur Findlay sanctuary.
Yeah.
And behind every patient was a healer, and behind every healer was one of these 8 or 9 foot tall angels with wings. So I
Wow.
thought I'd only seen what she had thought she'd seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then a couple of weeks later, after that, then we closed a class down. My wife said, "You're going to see a new guide." Well, I did see a guide, but I also saw sitting right next to me, 8 or 9 feet tall, from the base of the seat of the chair upwards. He must have been 8 or 9 feet had he been standing. Was the opposite of the first angel. This one was just pure black, no light coming out. And he turned his face to me, and well, it was awesome. I quaked in my boots. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe I've seen an angel. Now, he's supposed to be the messenger of an impending crossing over, isn't he? That was on the Monday night for definite. And on the Wednesday morning, my cousin in Rotherham, which is 200 or 300 miles away, she phoned me to say that her mother, my auntie, died the night before, one day after I saw the messenger. So I thought then maybe I did see an angel.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking if I've seen them, and I'm fairly convinced I've seen them, then some of these other stories that John Wester Anderson is finding, they must be true. So, there's a fabulous subject for research.
Mhm.
Well, I wouldn't discount it, but it would be a very, very, very difficult thing to actually research pragmatically, as I do. I mean, I know somebody. I'm absolutely sure there are such things as, I'll call them angelic beings and people of a higher realm. I remember the story of Gordon Higginson, the medium from England, and Gordon Higginson went to. It was I think it was Vatican or some place he went to. He wanted to go. It was St. Francis. It was St. Francis of Assisi's place. And as Gordon was walking along the concourse, he saw this monk coming towards him, and he saw the monk with these 2 archetypal wings, big, big wings at the back. And Gordon couldn't believe it. And
Yeah.
the monk came up and introduced himself and said, "Hello, I'm your helper for today." And Gordon said, "Oh, what's your name?" And he said, "Gabriel." It did look like the angel, but that was what Gordon was getting for the man's name. No, I certainly wouldn't say no such thing can happen. I mean, I've a friend.
Well, it's possibly a comment in terms of question. I just, when I hear about, you were talking about energies, Tricia, and then Paul was talking about angels. I don't know if everybody's familiar with John Dee and the Enochian sort of magic to contact angels, which, Paul's saying these very archetypal angels, which do appear through ceremonial magic to be contacted. If you do that kind of work. But you were mentioning energies, and I've always been thinking a lot about energies lately, and how the electromagnetic spectrum of the physical world, this electromagnetic spectrum that is generated by solar bodies, suns and stars. We live in a world that was generated in the stars, supposedly. So this energy that we are, in a Gnostic sort of sense, this energy that we are encased in the Gnostic material sort of terms, that we've fallen into, I think I think sometimes, using Uspensky's term, learn to think in different categories, that we try to understand that this energy is solar, or electromagnetic, and we possibly have access to another energy that is unrecognized and outside of the electromagnetic spectrum and frequency. And so accessing that energy is something, and I imagine somebody like John Dee was quite possibly trying to access that. And I'm just wondering, comments on that,
Well, it's quite possible. The only thing we know for sure is we are here. We're in the world of matter, and we are matter ourselves. And we also know for absolute certainty that every piece of matter is made up of atoms. And we all know that every single atom is actually 90% of it is empty. But every single atom vibrates at its own frequency for each individual atom. Now, this is where I'm thinking of we all vibrate at certain frequencies, and it depends what you can tune into. And I suspect, although I can't vocalize, I suspect we're tapping into quantum energy here, the likes of John Dee, and even when we do healing, it's not electromagnetic waves. I'm absolutely sure it's not electromagnetic waves, but that's all we can understand. And I make it quite clear in my third book that for these things to happen that I describe, there has to be an energy behind it that allows these things to happen. Let's not worry about what you call that energy, but there has to be an energy that we don't know what the name of it is. But you're absolutely right. I actually agree with you, and I certainly wouldn't discount angels or any form of helper that way at all. The person before was talking about, well, the harbinger of death, telling you that a death is going to come. That's quite possible. Yeah, why not? They're just giving you a warning that something's going to happen.
Thanks, Tricia. We've had a question about the name of your third book. What are you calling it?
I've got to think now. It's called.
I've just been calling it the third book.
I was going to call it it's Life and Death, Jim, but not as you know it, after Star Trek. But I've changed that. It's just called It's Life and Death ... but not as you know it. And a subtitle is More True: From the Unbelievable to the Bizarre. It's not out yet. It's not. I've just finished editing it today, and I'll be sending it to the publisher very, very soon. And I'm sure Wendy will you'll let me know when it's actually on Amazon, etc., etc. But Wendy has had a little preview of it, and it is absolutely bizarre, isn't it, Wendy?
Oh, it's got look, it's a wonderful, wonderful book. Look out for it because it's got so much detail, and Tricia's cases are so well documented. They're cases, the classics of psychical research, but so many other fascinating, interesting things. If you're someone like me who just loves those fascinating little details of research, this is the book for you. It's wonderful.
It's not boring, trust me.
No, nothing you do is boring, Tricia. That's absolutely correct. Now, we're running out of time. Sorry, Tricia.
I was going to say, nowadays people can go to various universities and they can do degrees in what they call parapsychology, but they tend to be a bit boring, I have to say, because they go through psychology first of all. And I actually object to the term parapsychology because that makes it sound as if all of these things are in our mind, and they are not. They're pragmatic, they are practical, they're evidential, and it kind of winds me up a bit. Now, a lot of the new parapsychologists, don't get me wrong, a lot of friends of mine, they're beginning to come into the real world and actually look at experience rather than it's all imagination within our minds. But as I say, the devil is in the detail. I can't generalize in a talk like this because there's so much detail, isn't there, Wendy?
Absolutely.
You have to read it for yourself. All of these things are true. I haven't wasted 35 years of my life on nonsense. Remember, I'm a maths and physics teacher, and I never, ever thought that I would be doing this. Never. But there you go. That's what happens.
Now, you're going to be speaking at a conference for psychology students. I think this is wonderful.
I know.
Tell us, you're really going to put them on the right track. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen when I get there, but I'm certainly one of the first speakers, and I'll be making it quite clear that they can do all the parapsychology they like, but you have to work out what really happens to real people. And the professor that's running it, I don't know him, and I don't think he knows me, but I said to him, I won't be speaking in psychological terms. I'll be speaking in reality. And he went, that's fine, Tricia, you go for it.
That it's not so much a question, but first of all, thank you so much, Tricia. This is wonderful, very fascinating. I would imagine you heard of the British spiritual healer Harry Edwards.
Oh, yes.
Well, Harry, I received a miraculous distant healing through Harry Edwards in 1970 when I was 20, and I became a student of his. And Harry always claimed that he did not heal of his own and that he worked with what he called spirit doctors. And there was never any doubt in his mind that I would always say, thank you, and he'd say, all praise to the spirit doctors. I'm merely the messenger. This is not carried out by me. So I think that's very fascinating also that, we work in conjunction when we do our healing work. We are working in conjunction with other beings, very possibly. When we get such astounding results, sometimes there are, others who know more than us working with us. I believe that.
Right. I think they can use your intention and they can mold it in some way. Can I tell you a quick story about Harry Edwards, Wendy?
Yes, of course.
Right, just in case you're all in a hurry. Many years ago, before I was really into this, there was a chap, I remember his name, but I'm not going to say it. It was a kind of foreign name. He was Italian, I think. And he said to me, he said, Tricia, I'm a trainee spiritual healer. That was in Glasgow. And he said, every week I go to this man that's in a wheelchair. I can't remember what was wrong with him. And every week he said, I give him spiritual healing. And he always says, oh, that was wonderful. I feel so much better. One week he said, I was ill. This is before your mobile phones. I'm talking about 30 years ago. And he said, I couldn't get in touch with this man to tell him that I wasn't going to be able to come. Anyway, the following week, he went in to apologize to the man, saying, I'm sorry I couldn't come. And the man opened the door with his wheelchair and he said, oh, hello. His name was Tony. Hello, Tony. He said, that was very nice of you to send that man last week when you couldn't come. And Tony went, okay, yeah, right. And he thought, that's a bit strange. So they did the healing and he asked him to describe the man that had come to see him the week before. And that was fine. So the following week, he brought a book by Harry Edwards with him, with the Harry Edwards picture on the back of it. And he never said anything. And well, before the healing the next week, he laid the book down at the side. And the man said, oh, you brought a picture of the man that came to see me last week when you weren't here. And that was Harry Edwards still working.
Well, I have a very similar story involving the medium Suzanne Wilson. Suzanne was in Manhattan and we had never met, but it had been arranged for her to come up to meet me at my place. But it was a time when Obama was president and he was in the city and she could not get a taxi. And she was about to give up because she didn't know the subway system when she said a taxi just kind of went out of its way and pulled up in front of her. And a man in the back seat, a gentleman in the back seat said, come on in, we'll share a ride with you, we'll take you, and then I'll continue on after. So she says, thank you very much. He said he told her not to pay. She got out, and she came up and she's sitting telling me how amazing. And then she looks across the room at this picture of myself when I finally met Harry Edwards in 1972. And she went, that's the man in the taxi cab. And I said, well, Suzanne, that man's been in spirit since 1976. So we just marveled, but he gets around, huh?
He does. There are certain people that do get around. There's a Dr. Fritz in in Brazil that seems to work through every genuine healer. When one dies, he goes to the next one, and Harry Edwards seems to do the same. And well, Padre Pio, going back within the Catholic religion, Padre Pio does seem to come through certain people as well. If they have that desire, the earnest appeal, they will come. And isn't it all wonderful? And we're not just talking nonsense.
So
I was in the cabinet, and there was a moment within the cabinet I could feel me sitting in the chair. I could feel the chair, but I also could feel myself standing up and feeling the curtain of the cabinet. And the woman in the seance room was saying, you know, all of you here, you all have had an report, you all had a message from a loved one, except me. I don't know if there's nobody, you know, and she was talking about it. And in that moment, I heard this woman speak. It was like the whole person standing, the whole part of me, whatever, standing at the curtain. All I wanted in this whole world was for this lady to get an report or a message. It was like I could feel like my whole, you know, my whole body was just my heart, really. It was the weirdest feeling. All in the whole world, I wanted this woman to have something, and something fell outside the cabinet. And it was a coin from her country, and it also was the passing of her dad, and there was another connection with her dad and these coins. And I asked Spirit about that later. I said, what was it? And they said to me, you know, I said, well, I wouldn't have created that because, you know, I'm not an importation medium. And they said, no, for that second, you summoned all the power of Spirit, and we could not do it. Yeah. So basically, we created that for this lady because your whole being wanted nothing else for this lady. And I thought that was pretty amazing.
Well, I said that at the very beginning of this, maybe everything in this line has to do with intention. It's all about intention. And that is why you should never send out a bad intention to everybody, to anybody. If spiritual healing, contact with spirit, anything you do in life, you have to do with good intention. And then things begin to work. Because as the other gentleman said, it says to send up a quantum spiral, and things work when the intention is genuine, it's real, and it's heartfelt. And as you say, you didn't do it, but you asked first. You asked, and then they latched onto that and said, okay, we better do this because she really wants this for the person. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I think that's how they explained it. They said there was no way we could not follow that energy.
Just very quickly, going back to years ago, the British medium Doris Stokes was one of the very, very first books I ever read, about 1980. I had no particular interest in it, but I read Doris Stokes' book, and she tells how when her husband was really, really ill, she was down by his bedside like that, and he was really, really on his last legs, and she prayed so hard for Spirit to help him. And at that moment in time, as she did that, a blue light came in the window. I actually saw the blue light coming in, surrounding him, surrounding the bed, and then the blue light went out the window again. And as the blue light left the window, her husband opened his eyes and sat up. And instead of saying, how are you, to her husband, she said to them, why did you not do that before? And the answer she got was, because you didn't ask. We have to ask. We have to be the people who ask for their help. They can't interfere unless you ask. And that's the bottom line.
Thank you.
And that's a lovely thought to finish with, Tricia. Craig, can I ask you to thank Tricia on our behalf?
Thank you very much, Tricia. It was enlightening. You're a shining light, and always look forward to hearing you. And today was very, very special. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good to see you. See you all again sometime.